everybody. Welcome to the world's greatest Spider-Man podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I'm your co-host, Mike L, and as always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Mervell, and today we are taking a look at Spidey comics from mid-November of 1989.
And we'll explain that in a minute, but before we do that, we'd like to welcome returning guest, Erica Rock. Thanks for joining us, Erica.
Yeah, welcome back.
Hi, thank you.
Woo. That's right. So yeah, in case anyone's confused out there, the reason this is mid-November and not just November, and I posted this on Facebook in Back Issue Magazine, and everyone was like, oh yeah, I remember when Spider-Man was bi-weekly. Well, Amazing Spider-Man was bi-weekly, but Spectacular and Web were not. The reason they did this is because at this point in Marvel publication history, the comics used to come out 4 months... Sorry, yeah, the publication date on the cover was 4 months ahead of what the date was that it actually came out. And starting with around here, they moved it up to 2 months. And so they had to have November, mid-November, December, mid-December. And that's why it's like that. So that's it. Isn't that cool? Not really.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Okay, so now we're going to start with our summary of part 2 of this really wacky Web of Spider-Man story. And Josh is going to tell us what happened. This one's called Sucked In by the Skinhead.
Right. So this is Web of 57. Again, I'll kind of do a disclaimer similar to what I said last time we talked about this story, but there's a lot of mature things happening in this issue, a lot of mature language and inappropriate language. It is to illustrate that this person is a bad guy, and maybe it was more acceptable to even use this language, even in this context, back in the 80s. So, with that being said, I'll continue on and recap this issue. So, we've got the newest villain in Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, Skinhead, who has turned into a giant flesh monster after a science experiment gone wrong in a lab with Rocket Racer. We see him, he's back at his Nazi base as he is devouring his other Nazi friends that are in his gang and consuming them to grow his flesh body to be more monstrous. And we see him as he reforms back into his human-esque form, and the skeletons of his former buddies are laying there on the ground as he sees Spider-Man swinging through the city. Spider-Man unfortunately couldn't find this guy, so he goes back to the university to talk to Rocket Racer and kind of updates him on what's going on. They do a tiny little recap of what happened last week, and pretty much Spidey's like, don't be too hard on yourself. It's not your fault. You did what you had to do, kind of thing, but let's go out and find this guy. So Spidey goes swinging, couldn't find him. So he heads home to see MJ as she is unpacking from moving into their new place above Harry Osborn's new building. So they start kissing, and then they hear the elevator door to their apartment start to open, and Peter quickly jumps into one of the boxes because he's still in his Spidey costume. And we see Christy stumble out, and she walks up to MJ, and she actually faints there on the ground, and they have to rush her to the hospital. So we cut over to Rocket Racer as he's doing some research, I believe, on what's going on and trying to figure out who this guy really is. And it's his name is Edward Cross, I believe, and he finds his I think he's doing all this research in the school, so he's looking through the school records or something. I don't know, it's not super important. He ends up calling the Bugle to find Peter Parker, who is going to contact Spider-Man. And he gets Nick Katzenberg on the phone, and this is the sleazeball photographer that rivals Peter at the Bugle. So he takes the message and he's not going to give it to Peter, and he's going to go and take this tip for himself to take the pictures so he can sell them to the Bugle and JJ. So we see Peter and MJ leaving the hospital, and one of the nurses catches up to, or the doctors catches up to them. And the doctor kind of explains what's going on, and that she is bulimic and anorexic, and they're kind of like in conflict with each other. And the only way for anything to happen is to get Christy to realize that she has a problem, because that's the only way it's going to get fixed. This is like a mental illness and not like necessarily a physical one, so they can't treat it with medicine per se. So she's got to be able to kind of be willing to seek help and realize that there's a problem. So unfortunately, we get a little scene where MJ storms back into the hospital room and just screams at Christy. I think a lot of the things that MJ is saying is possibly the appropriate thing to say to her, but she does it in like a really awful way, or at least it's drawn that way. Like she's screaming at her and pointing her fingers, but I'm sure we'll talk about that more later. Yeah. We cut over to Peter. He goes to the Bugle and he figures out what Katzenberg has done with the little help from Kate Cushing. And Spidey puts on the costume and he goes to the address, and we see that Rocket Racer is there, and he's talking to this man who turns out to be the father of Skinhead. And unfortunately, we get this backstory about Skinhead where he's actually Jewish, and that is the reason he turned into a Nazi, is because he was bullied for being Jewish. So I don't know. He's different. He feels like he's different because he's Jewish. So he becomes a full Nazi, and then he ends up showing up to the house and turning into his goop form, and he's trying to kill Rocket Racer and his father. And Nick Katzenberg shows up to take pictures, and just as Rocket Racer is like thrown out of the house, so there's like this big conflict. Spidey shows up, and the father tries to distract him, and while he's distracted by like his father kind of like yelling at him and talking to him about, you know, how he shouldn't be doing this, yada yada yada, Peter is able to see through the flesh blob that is attacking everybody, and he sees that there's like a faint silhouette of a skeleton inside, and he realizes that this guy is still controlling the goop from inside, almost like he's piloting it. So like as he swings his arms, the goop like arms are swinging. So Peter realizes that the only way to stop him is to actually jump into this flesh blob and then start fighting the skeleton inside. So he goes and he punches this guy's skeleton and he defeats him just fine. And then we kind of get this little ending where we know now to treat everybody like human beings, and it doesn't matter what the color of our skin is, and even if you're a Nazi or a black guy or a sleazeball like Nick Katzenberg, everybody's human or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. I totally get what they're trying to say with this, but they don't do a great job of saying it. I think making him Jewish was a really big mistake. Like,
That's weird.
It feels really wrong to like make the Jewish guy the secret Nazi the whole time. Like, it just feels like it's a twist for twist's sake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they could have given him any reason to feel left out or bullied. You know what I mean? Like, he's, you know, he was smaller growing up, so he was bullied. So he like bulked up when he was, I don't know, it just feels like weaponizing a group of people.
Yeah.
I don't know, you know?
So Erica, without us saying anything else, what's your take on your first impression of this?
Okay. Because I had a question, but I found this one kind of interesting because of the racism aspect of it. And the anorexia thing, or the bulimia anorexia thing, was a weird thing to stick in the middle. So clearly the Nazis, or the skinhead, and the anorexia bulimia thing was obviously a big theme at the time in the 80s, I'm guessing. I mean, I know. Yeah. And I found it kind of interesting because I was actually chuckling because I was like, wow, like I can't believe they said that. But I did like this one, but I also found it very strange how MJ started yelling at her about like the tough love thing, which is like harsh because we know now that tough love doesn't work with eating disorders. And it was a little bit like, oh, so that's just going to fail. I was just kind of like, wow, that's a lot to unpack in a kid's comic.
Right.
A lot of heavy things, but clearly two major themes that were happening at the time. And I was going to say, I don't know how old, I don't, like, you're close to my age, both of you, I think.
Yeah, I'm 46.
Like, okay. But it's like I feel like the Nazi thing and the Jews and the skinhead thing they were really bad to the Jews, even like in the 80s. That was the big, I mean, they hated everybody, but I feel like having him be Jewish and hating himself so much didn't seem like such a weird, it was kind of a lot, but I'm like, well, I feel like that, like it's a stretch, but it also doesn't seem like that big of a stretch considering the time. Okay. Does that make sense?
Well, and there was also the running theory that Adolf Hitler's mother was Jewish or something, and that's been debunked, but it's kind of that whole idea of like self-hatred or whatever, right? It was so strong that they became a Nazi.
That you want to disassociate from it so much. So like this one was big. I felt like that was a lot for a kid's. Well, I mean, I know adults read comic books too, but
what kind of an adult would read a comic book anyway?
Not us. But just like I think about, because what year did you say this was?
This is 89. 89, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I would have been like 13, 14, maybe. I'm trying to think, but it's like that was big at that time, and that's a lot for someone that age to sort of read about. Anyway, I kind of liked it, and the weird goopy skinhead thing that was all skin, and I was like, this is fucked up.
Yeah.
So I liked it.
Okay, let's just flat out ask you, do you think this is an appropriate topic because for a kid's superhero comic to be dealing with?
No. Like, and the anorexia one thing too. Like that was the belief. Like, yeah, that was. I felt like it was weird how they threw the anorexia bulimia thing in there. Unless was it part of another plot line that I just didn't read the comic?
It's kind of ongoing.
Been like an ongoing thing for a year probably at this point. Christie's been around,
yeah, something like that.
They haven't been doing it much better in any of the other comics. Honestly, it feels kind of on this, like at this level as how they've been dealing with it. This also isn't the first time MJ has like screamed at Christie about it. Right? Like she screamed at Christie and Peter about like, why do I got to deal with Christie's stupid problems? Yeah.
Eating disorder.
Yeah. It's,
that's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, here's
for
the
a comic.
Like, which is, I don't think there's anything wrong with dealing with these issues, but I don't think Gerry Conway did a good job of dealing with these issues. Like,
yeah,
like
that's I think the thing.
Yeah, like starting backwards. We'll talk about the bulimic thing. Like, again, you talked about tough love. It's like, even if Gerry Conway was going for that in this scene with Mary Jane, she comes off as completely heartless.
Yeah,
like
it's
one thing to be like, I don't know, like
like you have to be straightforward in serious situations like this, right? Like telling her you have a problem. This is the disorder that you have. You need to be able to want to change and seek help, or else this is going to kill you. Like I get being very straightforward, especially in a situation like this, but it's the tough love, like being angry about it to like shock them into changing is what it doesn't work. Because
she doesn't say like, you need to grow up, she says, Miss, I am furious. Furious because you're forcing me to watch you kill yourself. So, I don't care about you. I care about me having to watch it. And like, again, even if you're disciplining a kid, and I don't have my own kids, but one thing I know from teaching experience is like, I find that if I get mad at a kid, no matter what they've done, it's kind of a failure on my part, unless they've like actually murdered someone. I feel like nothing a kid is doing, like what, I have to chase them around, I have to tell them to do something 5 times. Like, there's really no excuse to lose your temper with a kid, I don't find.
Well, that's a tough one because like it can be what happens because we're human, right?
Sure, of course.
Like this chick is in the hospital already and suffering already, and just flat out screaming at her about it is just pointless, right? Like she already knows that she's going to die, and again, it's maybe was the attempt to put something that teenagers were dealing with in something, like what else would there have been, right? Like there's after school specials, and now we have the internet, and there's all kinds of information and Netflix episodes on these types of things like racism and anorexia, eating disorders. But it's like, where would was it a weird attempt to be like, maybe some girl will read this, or guy will read this and realize his friend has an eating disorder and want to help her? Like, I don't know what that was, but it just seems like a weird thing to just dump in the middle of a very already big issue of racism. I don't know.
Yeah, this feels very weird, especially in this issue.
Right.
Like it's not done well, but then also when you're sandwiching it in between a Jewish Nazi, it's like, what is happening? Like, it's so wild.
And also, like, it just feels like it's Gerry Conway's way of saying, I have a simple solution for this complex problem. Yell at them. It's like, problem solved. Yeah.
You're going to die, and if you don't smarten up, I'm not going to be here for you. And it's like, what?
I swear, if like next issue, Christie's like, after MJ knocks some sense into me, I'm no longer anorexic.
I'm cured.
Right.
I no longer have an eating disorder.
Yeah.
And we know now, and back then they didn't, we know now that you don't have an eating disorder for a short period of time. It's a lifetime thing. Right. So if she is fine in the next issue, which you'll have to let me know, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
So then now let's talk about this skinhead guy. Again, it's like,
sorry, that was a lot.
It's like, well, again, I don't know if this is the approach. Like they can deal with this, but did they deal with it in a good way? No, we all agree with that.
I know. And I think I said this last time we talked about him. I think dealing with this type of situation is important, especially for young readers. Like seeing this, like it can have a really good message. I think making the Nazi a supervillain was a mistake, and it would have been way better if they kept it on a more human level, where Peter is dealing with this with Rocket Racer, because I can't remember his name. Oh man. Rocket Racer's. Yeah. But he just transferred to the same university as Peter. So like they could have been dealing with this on a human real level, but making him this like super villain with a tragic backstory and yada, yada, yada. It's just like, doesn't fit. Him like saying slurs also feels really wrong when you're like showing it in like a big action panel, right? Like a big comic book fight. Like,
is there something wrong with me that I thought that was really funny?
Yeah, I think like
Because you're just like,
seeing it now, you can-
wow, that was okay back in the day.
yeah, in hindsight, it is so ridiculous. You can laugh at it, especially as like a premise, like explaining it to somebody. It's very funny, but I think like thinking about it at the time in like the 80s, it feels like, I don't know, just like shocking
was
that
okay.
it even happened. Yeah.
It's also just over the top. Like it's like almost like you're watching like a B movie, like a Dave Cronenberg movie or something. It's just ridiculous.
Right.
This is like one day this will be on one of Crack.com's lists of wackiest supervillains or something.
Right.
But anyway, yeah. Okay.
Well, it also looks like a giant piece of. You remember like Silly Putty?
Awful
Yes,
Gummer,
of
Silly
course,
Putty.
of
Yeah.
course. Yep.
I think it's a fun idea for a supervillain power. If I'm being honest, like I think the look of it is really interesting. Like it's disgusting to look at.
Yeah.
And the fact that like there's the skeleton on the inside. So like
That's kind of
Peter,
cool, right?
Yeah, Peter's got like he's got to use his brain to defeat the bad guy instead of just punching him at the end is really great.
Yeah.
But it's just like so on the nose of like Skinhead is a flesh monster. Like I don't know. It is what it is. I like it's very easy to judge something like this and show how like tasteless it is. In hindsight, years later, I'm sure at the time the writers felt like this was like great job and was very important. And maybe kids, maybe it did help kids at the time, but it's definitely awkward and weird to read it today.
Well, I can say I was about 13, 14 when this came out, and even I then thought it was kind of too on the nose and a little weird. You know?
Yeah.
Like I do.
So you read it the first time?
Yes, in like '89. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hot off the summer of Batman is when I was reading these Spidey comics.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So,
I have to ask Dave if he ever read that one. I don't know if he read a lot of comics, but it's weird to straddle the past and the present with the because we were just talking today when I left Tallulah. There's a couple of younger people that work there, and there's so many things that you really can't say anymore. And it's weird to straddle that, where it's like reading this as an adult and like, wow, that's a lot. But also it's like, was it that bad in the 80s? Probably not. Like, because we were there for it, right? And I was like, that wasn't terrible in the 80s. But you thought it was, Mike?
No. I mean, I thought it was a bad comic, but I didn't think dealing with it was bad. Like, I think it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, like, again, if you apply that logic to a 1989 comic, then there's stuff that we're reading right now that's gonna 30 years from now, it's not gonna be okay to say. But I don't know. I mean, whatever. Things evolve,
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So anyway, really quickly, Erica, what did you think of the art in this one?
I liked it. I like the weird, silly, putty look of it, and the I thought it was okay. That's not very good, is it?
Well, no. Here's the thing: is I've been reading a lot of Alex Saviuk's Superman comics from the like early '80s, mid '80s, and they're so much better than this. But it's because of the inker. We always I wish G.I. Jolie was on this review, because before she started reading comics, she didn't even understand there could be two different people doing the pencils and inks. But it makes such a difference, because this Keith Williams. I mean, I don't know Keith Williams that well, but he really flattens out these pencils compared to the job done on Superman.
See, you know what? I agree with you on Web of 56.
Okay.
But this issue, 57, I thought that the art improved so much. And it's the same inker and the same, it's still Alex Saviuk. But when you compare this issue with the last, it's like night and day to me.
Really?
Last week felt so flat and like so many lines, and it was just like it was fine. This one, I don't know why, everything just felt way more clean and solid. It was way easier to look at the art and see what's going on. I think that's the best thing about this issue, honestly. Even like looking at the cover, comparing the covers from this week's and last week's is like night and day. The covers, I'm not sure, maybe it wasn't Alex Saviuk doing the covers for both. Oh, no, it is. Yeah, Alex Saviuk doing both. But even the cover is like way better in this issue.
Interesting.
I thought the cover was good. And I think because when I'm reading, because I don't have a lot of information or knowledge on this. And I will say that the second one I read, I definitely could like the difference. But I guess because you expect comic books to be a little grainy and because of the paper quality. And so I mean, it was fine. I didn't think it was terrible. The drawing and stuff like that, like I liked it overall, but I don't know enough about it to be able to say like, I didn't read the last episode.
Yeah, it's totally fair.
To notice that it's better or worse, right?
Yeah, no, that's totally understandable. I also think too, like, this is like solid comic book art and it feels very comic booky and kind of, I guess, fits the tone of the story where it's like, it is trying to do something serious, but really it feels like a Saturday morning cartoon. That's kind of like the vibe of this one.
That's
and I think the art really matches that. And then when you look at the next issue, we're going to be talking about Amazing Spider-Man. The story is trying to be so serious, and it's all about like espionage and Nazis again, but trying to be more serious with the Nazis and like government agents under distress and stuff like that. And the art really matches that. I find like it's trying to be more adult and edgy, and the panels are really different. So I kind of agree with you too that it's like, it's a pretty solid comic art.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You mentioned Saturday morning cartoon. Alex Saviuk is, like I always say, kind of a throwback artist. His art looks very vintage, but also, for lack of a better term, it looks like it's meant for a younger audience, which is fine. But I do think he'd be better served with a better inker. But it's actually DC Comics Presents with Superman. If you want to see some of his really good art he did for DC. Okay. So I'll try to find some samples later and send them to you. But my keyboard has ginger beer spilled all over it, so I can't type. But anyway.
So maybe at a later date.
Maybe a later date. Yeah. So now we're going to jump to Amazing Spider-Man, number 325. This is the part 6 of 6 of the Assassin Nation plot. So we brought you in on the last part of a 6-part story, Erica.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Too confused. Yeah, don't worry. Hey. So reading the first 5 parts doesn't help.
No.
So we're going to start off with
I felt like it was okay. Standalone.
Okay.
All
Oh, you're saying you'd like to summarize it. Okay, go ahead.
No, I don't remember anything.
All right. So
I remember 2 things.
Yeah, pretty much same here.
We start off with this actually fairly good Todd McFarlane cover. A gigantic red skull in the background, and then Spider-Man holding the American flag, kind of holding his hand over his eyes. And then the American flag is all tattered, and he's standing amongst, what's it called?
The White House.
Capitol building. Oh, is that the White House or the Capitol building? I don't know which one's which, but yeah, whatever it is.
We're Canadian. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's the White House.
Okay. Washington, D.C. is burning. And, it's kind of a melodramatic cover, but overall, I think it's actually really good. Erica, what do you think?
Sorry, say that again.
Did we lose Erica? Okay. We just
No, am I still here?
Oh, yeah. You're still there. Yeah. What do you think of this cover?
Well, I was trying to find the link so I could look at it again, but I can't seem to find it. But
I can send it to you real quick in the chat.
I'll send it to you right now.
Okay.
And while our listeners Josh, do your impression of Don Rickles while we... Oh, too late. Okay, so now, Rickles. Erica, you can go ahead and look at that. Yeah, you didn't have to waste time. Okay.
I do remember liking the art and the cover of this.
Right.
And does he not have it's a giant red skull?
Yeah, do you see the link?
He's got like a weird cigarette holder.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, are you
Okay.
looking at the link right now?
Trying to.
Okay.
Yeah, these
There we
links
go.
are pretty
Yes,
rough.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
I got
it's
it.
very cinematic and
Yeah.
I like it. I do now. I'm okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
first
no
I
problem.
didn't-
It almost feels like a cheesy like novel cover.
Yeah. Or like a movie poster. But yeah, you're
Sure,
right.
yeah.
Like a
Yeah.
cheesy. You're right. I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yep. Sorry. I like it. I like it. I liked the artwork and the. Okay, I won't say too much.
No.
No, what do you mean? No, that's what you're here to review. What do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean you won't say too much? We want you to say a lot.
Well,
Erica, we'd
so,
like you to come on, but please just keep the
don't talk.
talking to a minimum, okay?
Yeah.
Don't talk, Erica. You don't know what you're saying. So I immediately liked the cover and the colors and the way it was drawn. And then when I flipped to the second page and I saw Todd McFarlane, which is one of the only comic book artists that I am familiar with,
Mhm.
I liked everything about the drawing of this, even though maybe the story didn't stick with me. Definitely the art of this one stuck with me. The panels are like, it just, so the cover, I didn't realize it was Red Skull.
Okay.
I don't know why, even though it's a giant red skull.
And he's in the story, but yeah.
Well, because he's not part of Spider-Man, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. I'm not completely stupid.
Yeah, he's Captain America, but yeah.
He's more Captain America. And so I was like, ooh, what's this one about? Like, it drew me in.
Right.
And there's lots of, like, the color of it is amazing. It looks so good.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's interesting that you know Todd McFarlane because, yeah, I think he's one of those rare artists that people outside of comics know, you know?
He is, because he had, like, he went into making, I don't want to say like action figures or
dolls.
Toys and stuff like that. The doll situation, which is my introduction. Like, Dave knew who that was. And that was my introduction. And he has some really cool, creepy shit. Like, we used to have the clown from
Spawn.
Donut. Yes, we used to have all the Spawn stuff. Some of the Spawn stuff. Yeah. And so,
no, I was going to say there's a Spawn movie coming out, but anyway, go ahead.
Oh, is there?
Oh,
no,
it's
just
there?
that I had some familiarity, and I was like, "Ooh, I totally get who this is." So it was a win for me.
All right.
You know what? Actually, speaking on the colors, real quick, I know normally I'm just realizing this now after listening to Erica, but normally, like, we're not huge fans of the like recoloring of the comics. So if you notice in this issue, Erica, when you're flipping through the pages, it's extremely like clean, very crisp lines.
Yes.
But when you see the other ones, it's like it's actual photocopies of the comic.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is like they've gone in and they digitally touched up everything, and I think
okay.
I like the feel of the. Sorry, was that Mike?
I was gonna say no. I think it's the opposite. I think they didn't I think with the other ones, they're low quality scans, making the lines thicker, and these are high quality scans, which is why they keep the thinness of McFarlane's lines. But I don't think they've touched up anything. They've just done a really good job of scanning them.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, and I think I definitely prefer the like scans because it feels more like a comic book, like you've got it in your hands,
like an old
kind
school
of thing.
comic, right? Yeah, definitely.
But for some reain, and I'm just realizing this now, but the covers always look really good in the digital touch-ups.
Sure.
I don't know. There's something about this cover that I think, because it's so busy and there's so much detail in it, that the digital touch-up actually services the cover and what's happening.
But you keep saying touch-up, but they're not touching it up, though. They're just scanning it. They're not actually changing anything. Like, if you look at the original issue, it's the same.
Oh.
Sure. But it's like, but it was drawn on paper, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and it doesn't look like this is paper. So obviously there's some sort of touching up going on.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're necessarily redrawing everything, but they're definitely going in and getting rid of the paper feel. Because both the comics that are printed that you're holding in your hand and the original copies of this art is on paper. You know what I'm saying?
But I think the difference is that the low quality scans we're seeing are scans of comic books. This is a scan of original art, which is drawn on cardstock giant paper. So this is still scanned from paper. It's just that even in the process of scanning it, you're able to maybe knock out a little bit of the gray that makes it look like actual
and
paper.
That's what I'm trying to say too, is like they're digitally making it look clean and and like it was drawn digitally, right? So they are going in and getting rid of that like texture, or if there's any mess ups in the photocopy, they'll like go in and touch that up and make sure that it's looks as close to the original art as possible.
Okay.
So I think in this case, I think it really helps the cover because of how busy it is and how much detail there is in the city and the smoke. And if this was the original and then photocopied, like the Spectacular and the Web of issues, I feel like you would lose a lot of what we see right now.
Right. Like even like I just jumped back randomly to Amazing Spider-Man 306. Now, granted, McFarlane's style was different back then, but it looks more like a photocopy because the lines look too thick. But again, it might just be the style that changed, but who knows? I don't know.
Well, and in my recollection of looking at comic books, I'm flashing back to when I used to go to the Bookmark downtown and look at comic books. The cover was always so much better, and then you open it and the actual pages were. So, I mean, maybe that's appealing too, because it's like the covers were always like very sharp and very exciting and shiny, and then you opened it and it was just like almost like newspaper and not as bright and blah blah blah. So, but this one, as you continue through, it all has that nice shiny sharpness of the cover of comic books that I remember from looking at them at the store.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So here's the elephant in the room. We still have to talk about the story.
Sorry.
Like, if you want to just quickly, like as quickly as possible, let's not even go page by page. Let's hammer this one out.
I'll just say that they basically... Okay, I've read this story 1,000 times. I don't really know what the plot is, but basically they're trying to assassinate someone and blame it on someone else.
Yeah. Right.
And that's it, right?
Yep, essentially.
And then in this issue...
And he's trying to... Spider-Man's trying to become part of the Department of Defense. So there's that aspect, right? He's denied because he won't show his face?
Well, no, but I think he's just being blamed. Isn't that it? Wait, let me just jump back to that scene. Where was that? Because
the first page is like rejected. He won't get security clearance, but Captain America, now I'm starting to remember. Captain America is like, he's part of it because he's got clearance because he's friggin' Captain America. And he wants to be a part of it, but they don't let him because he won't show his face. But the main plot, I think, is this Silver Lady. And the planet, they're trying to blame an assassination on one to start a war, right? Is basically it.
Yes. Now, clearly you read this more in depthly than I did. So, but no, you're right. Yeah. And the thing is then Peter leaves that situation, goes and talks with Mary Jane. Mary Jane,
unpacking.
Right. And then Peter goes back and kind of tries to do what he can on this mission anyway. He disguises himself as a
one of these agent guys.
Yeah, one of these agents. and he's helping with the mission, and then the Red Skull is revealed to be... Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, he puts a spider tracer on one of the guys when he's pretending to be an agent, and it leads them to, like, this museum place, and it turns out that the big plan that the Red Skull has is to steal the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
Very National Treasure-esque, and blame it on Symkaria, which will ensure the war.
Right.
And
so then...
Yeah.
Yeah, and then basically now this general who was denying Spider-Man at the beginning is now accepted Spider-Man. And Spider-Man also has like a little running plot of like not being overly patriotic, but also feeling kind of rejected by this guy. But by the end of the story, he accepts him. And he's like, I made a mistake, Spider-Man. You're a good American. I hope you'll accept my apology and your country's gratitude. And that's basically the end of the storyline. So it's kind of like it's David Michelinie's attempt to handle a little bit of politics with the story, right? So just as the Web of Spider-Man dealt with racism and bulimia, this is dealing with politics. I guess the question is, does it do a good job? Erica, what do you think?
Ooh, I guess no, because I was super confused by I was like, mostly I was caught up in the artwork of it. So that was my takeaway of this entire episode is I really liked all the artwork. I don't really recall a lot of the story. So maybe no, he didn't do a good job of it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, Josh, what do you think of the story?
It's not great. I think that there's a lot of great things and ideas. I'd really like to kind of see... maybe a story where Spider-Man gets involved with Captain America and some of his villains are teaming up with other villains to like start this war and have it be more of a political drama type thing. But I think they do a pretty poor job of doing that.
Right.
All of that stuff is there, but I think that the story is just so unbelievably convoluted that it makes the story unreadable.
Right.
Like, I can't believe that this started out a few issues ago with a bunch of different, like a different hero that they teamed up with.
Right.
And they had to go on a mission for like a parade or something. They were protecting the royals for this parade. Like, leading up to this point is crazy. And none of that even really matters to what's happening in this issue. Like, it's so much happens and it doesn't feel connected or needed. So hold on, Parks.
Right.
I don't know. It's not great, but I appreciate a lot of the stuff that they wanted to do.
Right.
I also love the idea of like a supervillains trying to steal the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights or whatever. I think it was both of them actually. Mm-hmm. That is so fun. You know what I mean? Like, that's great. And that's like a perfect thing for a supervillain to steal.
Right. Absolutely.
It like symbolizes all of this, all of these things, all of these American ideals, but it's like a physical thing that like a bad guy can stuff into a bag and sneak away with. Like, that's great. I like Red Skull being pulled into it. It's fine because Captain America's here. Silver Sable is an interesting character that I think they could easily flesh out, but and they try and give her stuff to do here and tie it to her country, and that's the country that's going to war, but like she just feels like an agent. Like, they could have had anybody in here being her character. It being Silver Sable and her country isn't even essential to the plot. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of just whatever. Again, there's a lot of great stuff that I wish would have been in like a good story and a good comic, but I think it's just wasted on this this plot that goes nowhere. Right.
Well, the thing is number one, they could have made it shorter. It didn't have to be 6 issues, but what you said about stealing the Declaration of Independence is right. Why didn't they just make that the story? Like, that is a perfect MacGuffin. Chase, maybe it gets stolen in the first issue, and then they have to get it back, right? Mm-hmm. Like, wouldn't that have been a much simpler, straightforward story than
for sure?
Got,
And then ending up in the Symkaria country, to deal with the new political leaders, and it's like, well, this was the first thing you decided to do when you became king of Zimkaria or whatever, and then that's where all of that shows up. It feels really weird doing it backwards. Yeah, you're totally right.
In fact, there's one thing about stories I think that works better is to start small and build up. So if you started with a simple little scene of, I don't know, they run into some of these bad guys. Oh, what are they doing here? And then later, oh, it turns out they stole the Declaration of Independence. Oh, now Silver Sable's involved. Uh-oh, then we got to get Captain America involved. Now we got to go to Simcaria, whatever it's called. Oh, now the Red Skull. So each chapter can build up and make the conflict wider and wider and wider. It would go from New York to Washington to America to international, right?
Yep.
That would have been much better. Like a James Bond story or something. Anyway, so
all
Erica,
over.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk about the art quickly. You mentioned Todd McFarlane at the beginning, but what did you think about the art in this issue?
I really liked it. I really liked the panels and they were long sometimes and very easy to visually digest and follow along with. I really liked the art in this issue.
Right.
I thought the colors were great. It's what I think comic books look like.
Yeah. I
Should
agree
look
with you. Like, yes, a lot of people, some people don't like McFarlane, but this issue, I think he did a really, almost every panel is good. Like, starting from the first page, the big giant hand on the, whatever that's called, stamping the thing. And then the next page, the side shot of the general's face, Spider-Man hanging there, and then just, the giant close-up of Captain America's eye. Like, you could argue that it's maybe doesn't serve a purpose to go super close to super far, but at least it makes it visually interesting. Then you get panels of Spidey swinging over the city, and then him and Mary Jane talking, and at least he's putting creativity into every panel.
Yeah. Even the one where I found myself absorbed, really looking at it. And even the panel where she's sitting, this is what I remember this because I wouldn't have normally paid attention. And she's sitting on his lap and they're on a chest, like a trunk, a steam trunk or whatever.
Yeah.
And her feet look kind of weird and awkward how she's sitting, but it's I noticed all of those things.
Right.
Because they were so, and so it is maybe odd but I just really enjoyed how every panel really stood out for whatever intricacies he added to it.
It's funny because, I've read tens of thousands of comics, but I'm starting to realize the difference between an artist like Sal Buscema, who did Spectacular, and Todd McFarlane, who does Amazing. And the two other artists that I'll name, and you probably don't know them, but Jack Kirby and Kurt Swan. So they're both two of my favorite artists, and they're completely opposite. But I realized, it took me until this week to realize one of the biggest differences is that a Kurt Swan comic, it's almost like if you've seen one, you've seen them all. Every issue looks beautiful. Every page looks beautiful. Every panel looks beautiful. But he never, ever experiments with angles or storytelling devices. It all just looks perfect. Whereas Jack Kirby, every panel looked completely different, a different angle, a different style. His you could divide Jack Kirby's style into 4 separate phases, realism, impressionism, expressionism, whatever. Whereas Kurt Swan is just, realistic illustrations from day one to the day he died. So it's just interesting to see how different artists can handle different things. And I think Sal Buscema and Todd McFarlane summarized that perfectly, because Sal Buscema on Spectacular, he started to experiment a little bit later in his career, but for the most part, everything kind of looks the same. And I don't know, Josh, what you think of that, but...
Yeah, I mean, I feel like anybody who's been listening to the show knows how much I love the storytelling, the panel work with Todd. I do think that this one was not his best work.
Okay.
But only because I think he's just being spread a little too thin, doing multiple issues in a month. I think the storytelling and the panel work is all still there, but I feel like I find just a little bit more panels where the artwork doesn't look great.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
the last page, there's the face of Silver Sable is like, because it's a tall, skinny panel, her whole face is squished. So both of her eyes can fit into the panel instead of just drawing half of her face. The last page. It's like, it's like, stuff like that really stands out.
Point.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's like the storytelling and the experimenting and the panel work and the way that the story's being told through like the layouts and everything is fantastic and is still like some of my favorite we've ever discussed. So
well, yeah, and I think my theory has always been, it feels like on any given page he'll spend time on, say, 2 or 3 panels and put a lot of effort into them, and then the other 2 or 3 panels he'll just rush through them.
Yeah,
okay.
Seems like it. Like, I'm going to spend a lot of time on Spidey swinging over the city, but then the shot of this guy walking on the street, who cares about that?
Or even just like
less important kind of thing.
Yeah, just like certain pages too will just be like so fantastic. Like the panels and like the artwork inside of them all look great. And then others, it's like you can definitely tell that this one wasn't your favorite page that you had to do, and you just kind of got it done. Right. But the art is great. Oh, hold on, just one sec. Sorry.
Sure, no problem. So while Josh is taking his dog for a walk, I just want to ask you, Erica, have you seen the first Spawn movie?
I believe that I have. You're sending me back for a bit, but does it have the?
I think it was Michael J. White was the star.
As Spawn?
Yeah, I think that's his name, right? The actor.
And
Michael
the
J.
clown
White.
was played by.
He's as a Latino actor.
John Leguizamo.
Yes.
Yes, and he was in Tu Wong Fu.
I haven't seen
Thanks.
that.
Yeah,
Thanks
of course not.
Julie
Newmar.
He was
they're drag queens.
The tick, not the tick.
The clown.
The clown.
John Leguizamo was also not the tick. It was like a.
Oh, he was in like a show?
No, it was a movie.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I have, but that. When did the Spawn movie come out? That was a long time ago now.
97.
97, yeah.
Yeah, I did see
Batman
it.
and Robin, anyway.
Okay, I did see it, but maybe not like the year it came out, but afterwards. It's I gotta watch that again. Ooh, by the way, totally aside, I did watch after our last podcast. I did finally get to watch. Is it Blade?
Oh, nice.
Drawing a blank.
Oh, nice.
Both the they're not good, but definitely I watched them.
They're okay.
Because wasn't he in the one of the episodes? Yes. That I had to read, right?
To watch,
and I had never seen them with Wesley Snipes. Thank you. I did finally get to watch those.
We will be reviewing those in a future podcast, but stay tuned for that. Yeah.
Also, the movie I was thinking of was The Pest that he was in, which
I don't think I saw
just happened to also come out in 97.
Oh, yeah. Spawn was weird.
Yeah, yeah. The visual effects are crazy in Spawn. It's ridiculous. It's like a PlayStation video game graphics. It's crazy.
Yeah, but I think I need to revisit that. It's been a while.
Yeah, but I don't know. What else can we really say about Amazing Spider-Man this week? Todd, I think, is still doing great work telling the story. Like the artwork tells more of a story than the actual story in the dialogue. You know what I mean? Like, I would recommend people flip through the art in this issue, this whole arc. Honestly, you'll get way more out of it than if you try and sit there and read and figure out what's going on. Yeah, I don't know. That's Amazing Spider-Man, though.
Right.
Is it? So, see, you got dump me in this, and I'm like, I don't know. Sure, okay, I can say so. It was fine. Is it is it your least favorite of the Spideyverse? Is the Amazing Spider-Man? Is that?
I think it changes all the time. I think like when we first started reading, back when we started in like beginning of 1980, I think that Spider-Man was the best one. Amazing Spider-Man, was the best one, and it felt like an even mix of like Saturday morning cartoons and more like serious topics. And then Spectacular Spider-Man was really kind of like Peter Parker's personal life and him at the university with his friends.
Okay.
So that was really cool. And then there was another book instead of Web, there was Marvel Team Up, which was the worst thing ever. So it was so bad. But like over the years, like writers and artists change. So it kind of like honestly all depends on what's happening at the time.
Okay.
I think when Todd McFarlane first took over, I think Amazing was doing really good. And it was around the time where like the writers were starting to bring back a lot of the golden age supervillains and give them like new suits and new powers and stuff like that. And there were some really fun things happening. But right now, lately, they've been going on this like arc of trying to be serious and do these really long, drawn out, like 6-8 part stories. And I don't have a lot of fun with those ones usually because they're not as well thought out as I think the smaller like character stuff. So it depends. Yeah, honestly, sometimes Webb's got some really fun stuff. Sometimes it's nonsense.
Yeah, Amazing is usually considered the main one, but at this point it's debatable what has the I mean, Gerry Conway was writing Web and Spectacular, and he actually started he was the first writer to really do Amazing Spider-Man after Stan Lee left. Like one guy did it, then he got fired, and then Gerry Conway did it, and Gerry Conway was only 19 when he started. So he did Amazing, then he did Spectacular, then he came back and did Spectacular, and then he did Web. So he has one of the longest track records with Spider-Man, so he is one of the most important creators. But he probably will not be remembered for Skinhead.
I assume not.
I really liked that one. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, on that note, we're gonna jump to Gerry Conway's second book for the week. This is Spectacular Spider-Man 157. Josh, you're gonna summarize this one, right?
Yeah, I can quickly summarize this one. So
I can also help because I love Spectacular.
Yeah, sure. So this one is Together They Treat Spidey to hold on, was it? He's back. Him too. Together they treat Spidey to electroshock therapy. So this one's shakedown. We start off with Electro as he is going to this bank to rob it, and he has the plans to this to like the blueprints to this bank, so he knows exactly what he has to do when he gets there. And this is like this huge like thing that he's been planning out, or so we think. And on his way there, an earthquake happens, which destroys the bank. So he's able to just fly in and take the money and leave. But of course, he is stopped by Spider-Man along the way. And actually, he does get away. Electro zaps a building and puts a civilian in danger. So Spidey leaves Electro to go save him. And then Electro like slinks away through a sewer. And so we see Spidey swinging away, and we see this like guy in the shadows that's got a bag full of money.
Right.
So Spidey keeps swinging, and he goes to the Daily Bugle for work. J. Jonah Jameson calls a meeting, and it turns out that he has finally done it. He sold the Daily Bugle to the Puma, who is Thomas Fireheart.
Yeah.
So he's forced. Yeah, he was like bought out. And then we cut over to some interludes with Robbie Robertson as he is kind of living his life with this Amish family. And Tombstone is also there, kind of threatening him. He almost tells this Amish fellow his whole story, but then Tombstone shows up and he's too scared and doesn't say anything. Cut back to the main story. Electro is talking to this guy who is like he's like running a business through this sensor security. Bless you. This like he owns a security company, and he's like selling this information to Electro to get money. Right. And that's how Electro got the blueprints to the bank and was able to go in, or he was going to be able to just go in, no problem, take the money. So he kind of shows up and he's like threatening him like, hey, I'm going to spill your secret to everybody if you don't give me more blueprints. He's like, yeah, our partnership is good. Here you go. And then,
but he's also accusing him of giving him, like, screwing him somehow, right?
Right. Mm. So as Electro's leaving, this guy gets onto the phone and he is talking to like somebody else that he's in partnership with, and we don't know who it is. MJ and Peter are going down to a little party that Harry and Liz Allen are throwing. I guess she's Liz Osborne now. They're having a little dinner party. Flash is there. They're playing with the baby, and then the power goes out, and there's like this huge boom that happens. So Peter goes to investigate, and he puts on his Spidey costume, and he's swinging around. Turns out that there's been another building collapse in the financial district, so Spidey swings down, and Electro is there again. This time, Electro is easily able to just kind of like zap him, and he falls into some rubble, and Electro flies away. And when Peter stands up and is able to like clean himself off, he looks around and he sees the blueprints to this place, and in the top corner is the logo to this security company. So he knows that's where he's got to go next. Cut back over to Robbie Robertson and Tombstone, and Tombstone again tries to kind of like intimidate Robbie, and then Robbie punches him because he's completely done with Tombstone's shit. Right. Robbie runs away, and Tombstone starts chasing him, and we're done with that interlude. Cut back over to Electro. He shows up to the building, the security building, and he starts confronting the owner again. And then we see electricity fly at Electro, and we see a leg come into frame, and it turns out that this guy's also working with Shocker. And I didn't know this. This is pretty interesting. This is the first time that Electro and Shocker are meeting each other.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah, I would have thought that this would have happened a while ago. So the two of them start fighting each other in this building, and it's starting to like absolutely destroy the place. Electro and Shocker are going back and forth, zapping each other. Electro ends up knocking Shocker out temporarily, and he grabs some like so he grabs the briefcase with all the money that he's owed. He starts walking out, and Spider-Man stops him and punches him. The money goes flying, yada yada yada. We cut back for one more interlude, or maybe we have more, I can't remember. But Robbie is still in his like battle with Tombstone. He's getting beaten up, and in a last-ditch effort, Robbie grabs a pitchfork and he stabs Tombstone, and Tombstone is kind of like shaken up a little bit. He's like hobbles away into the cornfield and runs off. And for the first time in a long time, Robbie feels safe and happy, and he goes back into the family to have dinner. Cut back over. Peter goes back to the apartment to go back to the dinner, and they're happy. And then we get this one last interlude with Tombstone showing up to Hammerhead and Chameleon's headquarters, and his chest is all bloody from being stabbed with a pitchfork, and he finally agrees to team up with them to exact revenge on Robbie Robertson.
Well, I can say that I, as usual, really enjoyed this issue.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a masterpiece, but I do think it's a fairly original idea to have a supervillain just simply trying to rob banks and rob places, but being kind of not foiled, but beat to the punch by someone else. It's just a weird, clever plot. And then to have the idea that this guy is selling information to someone else so that person can beat him to the punch. I think it's a really cool idea. The subplot of JJJ is pretty cool. Obviously, I know it's only temporary, but I'd like to see where it's going. And then the Tombstone thing, although some would argue it's getting tiresome, I like that Robbie's finally starting to fight back, because Erica, just so you know, the Tombstone thing's been going on for 2 years.
Or maybe even longer, honestly.
Yeah. It's been going on a long time.
It's been a long time.
But overall, yeah, I did really like this issue, and we'll also talk about the art later. But Erica, what'd you think of the story in this one?
I was really lost on this one, and because I didn't know who the Robbie guy in the Tombstone.
Yeah,
I had no idea what that plot was about, and at one point I thought, is he like his alter ego? Like, is he crazy? Well, that's
interesting.
But it was like, was he a manifestation of his own sort of inner turmoil when he was fighting with him? I didn't get what any of that story was about, because he kind of looks like a bit of a ghost or whatever.
Right.
And so when he was like, I'm sick of you, and fighting with him, it was almost like I had this weird thought that it was part of himself.
Gotcha.
Because I don't know that plot at all. So I was super confused by that. And also, I'm like, what the hell? They're jumping to this dude who's in a Amish village. I'm like, what is happening? This is so different from the guy robbing the banks. But the robbing the bank thing, him being foiled almost by accident by the other guy that he didn't know with his padded suit, it was kind of funny to me that they were like similar but didn't really know each other. But I was mostly lost.
Okay.
I was mostly lost on this one.
Huh.
You know, it's pretty funny. It's pretty funny that you mentioned Tombstone feeling like a ghost, or like another like part of Robbie, because that kind of summarizes almost their whole relationship and their arc together. So their thing is like they grew
two separate people.
Yeah, they're two separate people, and they grew up together in high school. But Tombstone like killed somebody when they were younger, or something like that. Like they had a history, and then Tombstone shows up like a decade or two later when they're adults, and he's kind of like framing Robbie Robertson and like saying like, you knew all this stuff happened, it didn't come forward, yada yada yada. So it is kind of like a ghost from his past, like coming and haunting him, and that's really been this whole Robbie Robertson and Tombstone arc.
So is Robbie Robinson, like, does he have any sort of super power, or is he just a normal
No,
person?
He's just a dude. Tombstone, it's unclear if he has powers. Apparently he's just an albino, is what they say, is that he's albino. But he has like a vampire nose, and he's huge and feels like he has super strength.
Gray.
Yeah, and he almost like goes toe to toe with Spider-Man at times. So like, I feel like he kind of does have superpowers, even though they don't really say he does.
Okay. I was lost on that whole plot.
I think like later on in comic history, he is some sort of like super powered, like super strength guy, but
the other weird thing about him is, at this point he was being drawn as, for lack of a better term, Caucasian, and now he's drawn as black, like, you know, Negro, basically.
Which, Robbie or Tombstone?
Tombstone.
He looked totally... See, he did not look black to me.
You know, not at all, but they've changed him to look... He looks like black now, but albino, you know, it's very odd, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Like, in this episode, did you say he looks... Because he looked Caucasian, not black, drawn...
No, yeah, gray. I mean, like now, like 30 years later.
Modern iterations,
they've
kind of updated his look.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
yeah, he just was like this big, weird Frankenstein-y.
Yeah,
like it was a weird character. I just didn't get what was happening, but that makes sense now that you say it.
Yeah,
but
so this wasn't a standalone.
No,
for me.
And also too, I think while I liked both stories and like both stories that were happening in this issue, I I enjoyed them because I had the context, but it doesn't fit in the story. Like the Robbie stuff doesn't fit with what's going on here.
No.
Yeah.
So I can totally see why Erica would have a problem with it in this one.
Yeah.
And I didn't really realize that until you kind of started talking about it. I'm like, you're totally right. It doesn't really belong in this issue. Like it doesn't really fit well.
Well, it just felt like a weird, okay, so it says interlude, but it's so vastly different that I just felt like, okay, there's something else going on. There's more to this story, but don't know what it is because I haven't read the previous issues.
Yeah.
Is basically what that felt like.
This issue also was really strange because last issue, it was like really in depth of like this Robbie Robertson storyline. And Peter was Spider-Man was actually in the same area as them, searching through like farmland for Robbie Robertson. And that's what the whole last issue was about. Like he came into contact with this like group of people who had like this little village set up and whatever. And Spider-Man was just like trying to find his friend. And then this one starts off, he's just fighting supervillains in New York. So it's strange to kind of go from that one to this one. And then even with that context, like cutting back to the Robbie Robertson story, it's like pointing out the fact that Spider-Man's not looking for him, you know?
Yeah.
It's a little strange. So,
and the thing is, you know, now, like back in these days, ideally one issue of a comic book would have a complete story. And they might have like a, you know, to be continued next issue, but it felt like a complete story. Nowadays, you read one comic in 5 minutes and it feels like a scene. Like it's the equivalent of one scene in the TV show. That's how long our current comic book is. This is kind of like a weird in the middle thing where it's like you come in the middle of 5 different plots, but you don't get a full development of any of them. You know, it's almost like you're coming in the middle of an episode of one TV show, but you're only seeing like the 15-minute mark to the 30-minute mark, but you don't see the beginning of the episode or the end of the episode.
Or the end. Yeah.
It's really weird. Yeah. It's like, I understand what he's trying to do with juggling all these plots, but it doesn't feel like this one story has a complete, like a theme or unifying thing that holds it all together. You know, because if you're going to juggle different stories, that's fine. But usually you want to have them tied together in some way, right? So it doesn't feel so jarring.
Yeah. Well, because as someone who jumps in on this and hasn't read before or read the ones before or whatever, like some of them stand alone enough that, or they give you like a little recap here and there where they're like, oh, this person, they're framing this person for the assassination of this person. And so you're like, okay, that's what happened in the last episode.
Right.
I can catch up with that. This one, it was just like, there was no, there was no little hints as to what had happened before or why I'm reading this. And so that's where, as a novice to this, it's a difficulty because even the other ones, they weren't like maybe standalone, but there's always like a little hint at what came before, or like there's a little note that says, if you want to further read the episode, blah, 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 right? Whereas this one was just like completely like, if you didn't read the episodes before, too bad, because you're lost.
Yeah, totally agree.
And so again, with the, there's like little recaps and hints, but this one, no. I felt super lost at this one.
Yeah. I think too, if it was like, it was kind of like the Amazing Spider-Man issue where it's like part 6 of this story, because Spectacular doesn't have it. There's almost like no excuse for it as well to like not have some sort of like explanation behind it.
A little bit, right?
Yeah. But I will say, I think that the Electro and Shocker story is so good.
Yeah.
I loved it. Right. I don't know. I think what it is that it feels like a story about the Shocker that we're following. and we're kind of seeing it unfold through Spider-Man's eyes as he's kind of like showing up and being like, oh man, Shocker did something bad again. And then Shocker runs away, and then he like deals with his problems. And then we see him again. Like, Spider-Man doesn't end the conflict in this one. Spider-Man doesn't show up and beat up all the bad guys. He kind of just shows up at the end as like a police officer almost to arrest the bad guys at the end, like when the story's done. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't show up to face off against anybody. Like, it's super fun. We get a story with like Shocker and Electro, and they're kind of like dealings with each other through this security company that's kind of like doing shady business with like the mobs and stuff. It's so fun.
Oh, is this the one with the mob and the hammerhead guy and the
there's like a little
okay.
hint at the end with them. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
wait a sec, Erica. Sorry, I didn't realize you don't have the link, eh?
I can't seem to go back to it. It's weird. When I go in my email, I can't seem to find the one that you sent me.
Okay, I just sent it to you in the chat. So, because I want to know your take, because there's one more thing to talk about, and that's the art in this issue. Penciled by Sal Buscema and inked by Mike Esposito. So usually Sal inks his own work, but as mentioned in the letters page, Sal Buscema was actually acting in a play at the time of the publication of this issue, so he had to get help on inking. But I usually like Sal inking his own pencils, but I actually liked Mike Esposito, the way he kind of softened up some of the harsh edges in this story, and it really brought out how good his freaking storytelling is. Erica, I just wanted you to know what you think of the art in this one.
I liked it. I feel like it was classic comic book artwork.
Right.
It's hard for me to like skip through the pages because there's ridiculous amounts of
ads, pop-ups,
and weird sex pop-ups.
So ridiculous.
Whatever. I'm like, hey, I don't need to. But as I'm perusing a page or two, I like it. It's good comic book artwork to me. Like, it's clear, it's descriptive visually, and I would say I like it.
Well, like, even if you jump to digital page 8, which is original page 9, the shot of Robbie riding with the Amish guy on like the horse and carriage, the close up in the middle of the page of Robbie's face, that looks like a John Romita Sr. picture. It's perfect. And then below that, you see the close up of
Tombstone's face.
Tombstone.
Yeah.
And again,
Tombstone with his buzz cut.
Mike Esposito has like softened the face a little bit to make it look a little bit more, I guess, naturalistic. And I really like this whole issue. It's just so well done. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like it for sure.
Yeah, again, like not as experimental as McFarlane, but he's just such a good storyteller and so clear. It's always solid. Put it that way, So, yeah. But anyway, we talked about how these stories have been ongoing. Well, I'll have everybody know that the Tombstone story is wrapping up for at least a little while, and all the Spidey titles will be going into a new direction for about 3 months. But I'm not going to say anything more about that because I don't want to spoil our next episode. But you'll be happy to know that some of these subplots are wrapping up. So that's good.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. So anyway, Erica, we'd like to thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Again.
Unfortunately, I don't want to sound like kind of be a Debbie Downer, but this is the last time you'll ever be on our show because we're going to be ending the podcast in just a few weeks. So
really,
this was your 6th and final appearance on Here Comes the Spider-Cast. Yep.
I feel honored and very privileged to be a part of it.
Well, and we also have some facts coming up on our final episode, but I'll spoil one of them and say that Erica, you're our second highest number. You have the second highest number of appearances on our show. Can you believe that?
Yay! That's amazing. No, I don't.
Congratulations.
Because I'm terrible at this.
No way. You're great.
It's honestly so great having you on. I love hearing your like perspective on things. Yeah. Especially since it's really easy for like Mike and I, because we're like really familiar with this stuff, to like rattle things off and then rush through talking about things. So it's really great, like getting somebody's perspective that isn't as familiar and is enjoying it or not enjoying it, and kind of like seeing where you're coming from. Yeah. Because like I loved Spectacular this week, but knowing that like you didn't enjoy it as much because you don't have the context and it doesn't work for you, like getting that point of view is really refreshing. And yeah. So it's always been great having you on.
I could be a part of it.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's so awesome. So you're giving it a rest
for 1 week, and then we're gonna start a new podcast.
Right. Yeah. So, I'm sure we'll be doing something.
Yeah, we'll be sure to have you as a guest on that one as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. I feel so cool to be a part of it.
Ooh, yeah. Good. Okay, so there you go. And so once again, thank you, Erica. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
And be sure to join us next week on Here Comes the Spider-Cast, because we will be wrapping up our review of the 90s animated cartoon, featuring the final 3 episodes, the wrap-up of Secret Wars, and then the 2-part Clone Saga. So that'll be interesting. And we'll be joined by special guest Andrew Helmer. So be sure to join us for that one. And Josh, you can take it from here.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to him about the finale and the cartoons. He's going to be a great person to have on for that. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. You can leave us a review or keep in touch over on Facebook or on our YouTube, or you can find all of our podcasts and videos on our website at thecomicbooksyndicate.com. Please let us know what you guys think about all our stuff. We want to keep that comics conversation going.
That's right. So until next Monday, Spider Friends,
go for it!